All right, now I believe it's 11 o'clock and we start. So welcome to the auction seminar, this time on actor variety. This is one of the last ones in our series of webinars so far on how to design auctions, on the effects of auctions. We will now give you an introductory presentation and then we'll be available for questions. So if you have any questions, simply after our presentation, write them in the Q&A session or write them in the chat and we will address them. Briefly, I believe many of you have already participated in the last Auction Academy webinars. The AURES project itself is a Horizon 2020 funded project to support policymakers and other stakeholders in the design of renewable energy auctions and to further debate on it. And today our presentation will focus on why actor diversity in auctions is important to keep in mind, what the impact of auctions is on actor diversity and potential problems that could arise and how these potential problems could be addressed. Very briefly to the background of myself and my colleague Silvana Tiedemann, we both work at the energy consultancy Ecofys. Ecofys has offices in several European countries and focuses on energy policy, technology and systems. And we base this experience here, as we talk about today, partly on academic research, but also on very concrete consulting projects we do. For example, we are consulting currently the German government and the design of wind energy and auctions and PV rooftop auctions. We've in the past also supported the German government in the design of ground mount PV auctions, and we are also involved in several projects on auctions in developing countries. Let me briefly show you the next seminars that are expecting you from an auction theory. I think we're almost through with it. You can listen to all the past seminars. They've been recorded, so you can all access them on our website. There will be one final seminar taking place in 2 weeks, which will address a debate on auctions where several stakeholders and experts will address the impact of auctions. So coming to our today's presentation, the guiding questions: why does actor diversity matter? What are the implications for designing good auction that takes into account actor diversity, and which problems persist in terms of actor diversity, and how can they be addressed? So why does actor diversity matter? Actor diversity can be both a political goal and or also an enabling condition for an effective and efficient auction. Political goal because often, for example, also for the German government, actor variety or taking into account small actors or taking into account local producers or local manufacturers. This is often a directly stated goal also of an energy transition. Why is that? Because it's believed that often the energy transition is easier to be accepted among a broad coalition of stakeholders if they also themselves can take an active role in this transition, meaning that they can themselves also develop projects and invest in projects. And this is also being done to tackle the potential opposition of this not in my backyard mentality. So that's an issue why often diversity is also directly a political goal. But it is also important for an efficient and effective auction scheme. One of the reasons is because if we don't have actor variety, if we have too much concentration on a few big players, we have a market concentration that would crowd out other players and on the midterm reduce the competition in an auction. Also, it's important to keep in mind that for the energy transition, as much as capital and size as possible have to be mobilized. And the experience shows it's often easier to get permits for example, wind projects or to have wind sites allocated if the local people are themselves actively lobbying for it. And for them to do it, they often have the opportunity to participate in the auction, etc. So this is the case so far, that actor diversity is both important, both as a political goal and also as a precondition in a way for functioning auction scheme. The next question then that needs to be addressed is how to design a scheme that is taking account for actor diversity, and that my colleague Silvana Tiedemann will present.
Thank you, Fabian. I will now have the pleasure to go with you through the design process of the auctioning scheme. So, at the very beginning, I would like to mention that actor diversity actually needs to be considered in the entire design process. What are the main steps from a perspective of actor diversity? First of all, we have to start with a market analysis. So the guiding question there is, which actors are currently involved, at what stage of the planning process of a RES project? This is important to know, where do we actually come from, and what kind of market structure do we ever actually have in a particular country. The second step is then to focus on the general design, and in this specific moment, it is actually very important to consider that we have sometimes conflicting goals. For example, we would like to have volume control, or we would like to have an effective auction. We also want to have an efficient auction, that is high competition, and we would also like to have actor diversity. At this particular point, actor diversity is one goal among the others. And then in the third step, what we recommend doing is focusing on a very specific analysis, which focuses on the challenges for particular actors that result from the design that has been suggested in the step before. And there we answer questions, for example, is a preferential treatment of a certain actor group justified, and if so, how it could be looked like. All this you can also read in the bottom of the slide. You will find this in the next one as well. This is particular for our guests who will read or go through this webinar at a later stage. If we come to the market analysis, so really thinking in terms of what has to be done there, we see that there are some particular problems. Let me give you an example. In the beginning, what you can see is you basically have an idea and often a site which you would like to develop, and in the end you would like to have, in this case, for example, a windmill standing there. And throughout the planning process, you have different steps, like the pre-planning, you have an approval process, the construction starts, and the commissioning. And throughout this process, you will see different actor compositions. Now, the actors which do play a role, particularly in European countries, are project developers. We also see local cooperatives or citizen organizations. We see investors and banks, suppliers, utilities, and so on. And what we can see is, if we have a look at where do they actually stand, is in the beginning of the project, we will see that project developers are quite important, and then their share decreases once construction and commissioning starts, partly because these are the steps which are highly capital intensive, and this is also where other actors then come into play. And what you can see here with the red squares is that you can decide on the timing of the auction within this planning process, and what you will see is that you have a different actor composition depending on where you actually time the auction. We talked about the timing in quite a few of the last seminars, but here it is important that if you basically cut out this actor composition at this particular point, you will see, for example, here that in option 1 you will see quite a lot of project developers, whereas in option 3 other actors become more important. All that to say that already by timing the auction, you will have a certain actor composition in the current market, but also a different actor composition which you might to guarantee that it's still there once you introduce the auction. Now, I would like to give you one example of, again, Germany in the wind onshore sector. What you can see is that in the planning phase, quite a lot of project developers play a huge role, along with associations and farmers and citizens. And then if you have a look at the operation phase, which is basically where you can slightly align it also with construction and commissioning, you will see that the part of project developers goes down. So again, that as an example to show that the actor composition is not very fixed throughout the lifetime of a project, but changes over time. Now, if we go to the next step, we said we have first the market analysis, then the general design, and in the end, a specific analysis. If we go to the second step, which is the general design, we will see that we have potentially conflicting goals, and they need to be balanced. Now, how do you do that? First of all, there are no regret options. Some of them are, for example, a simple design and a transparent design. This basically allows that quite a lot of numbers of actors will be able to access the scheme. But you will also see others where you really need to balance these goals. For example, when we talk about financial and material qualification requirements, often what we see is that particularly small actors might come into troubles to show huge financial backing or liquidity. And also, if we talk about the realization period, it might be a question to ask, how flexible or gracious should it be? If we then go over to the general design, we are still left with the question, which problems persist, and then obviously also how to solve them. And this is now the focus of what we call the specific analysis. So what we do in the beginning is we go with a scoping, so basically, what are the challenges and who is affected by them? Then we go and can the actors actually adapt by themselves or through corporations in the market to the particular design, or would a preferential treatment be justified? And then the third step would be to come up with some solutions, and obviously also to ask the question, is the solution also implementable? And as a fourth step, we have to then again come back to the goals and ask about the consequences of this suggested solution on the whole auction and design. And at this point, we can go with a slightly different weighting of the goals. They are still all as important for the general design, but if we can limit the part of the sector which should be eligible for preferential treatment to a smaller part, then the whole effectiveness and the whole efficiency of the auction might not be affected as much. But there again, it's a balancing exercise. Now, if we go through potential challenges and the relevance of thereof, it is easiest to show that as on an example. So let us think of the German auction design again. What we know that in Germany we have a proposed auction, it's not yet a law, but it's a proposed auction which happens at a what we call rather late stage in the planning process, so where the actors already have received the approval by the official authorities, and they have to show that they actually developed a particular project up to quite a huge extent, and in combination they will have to hand in a bid bond to make sure that they will actually really realize their project and that no false bidding is occurring, and then afterwards they will have a realization period of 2 years. Now, what are the potential challenges involved there? First of all, we have to ask, do production costs actually differ according to the actor? What could that be? It could be, for example, that a small actor gets worse condition in the procurement because they have a smaller portfolio. It could also be, on the other hand, that they have easier access to sites or better better locations. It could also be that they have more efficient planning processes. And this is also what we see in Germany, is that structurally the production costs are different. So smaller actors have higher costs in particular cost fields and lower costs in others. But what our analysis has shown, not with certainty, but has shown is that in general these costs may level out. The second one is to what extent do transaction costs of the auction actually affect particular actors more than others? I'm kind of emphasizing this more than others because we're in an auction, and if everybody is affected to the same extent, it will increase the prices, but it will not necessarily increase, not necessarily translate into a worse position in the market. So therefore, it's really always like, is one particular actor affected more than another? So, and what we see in terms of transaction costs is, yes, smaller actors who only participate once will have to put more energy in actually participating, but on the other hand, the transaction costs for participating in the auction are small enough compared to the overall project development of wind that we can say that this is not a major issue. And the third one is how difficult is it actually to provide a bid bond. So we said that you have to show in Germany 30 euros per kilowatt that you can hand it in, and what we assume is that particularly smaller actors will have to go to banks and ask for a kind of a guarantee that they will step in case the bank will not, in case the actor will not pay. So basically a classical bid bond. And so we did quite a lot of talks with banks and with actors in the field, and we came to the conclusion that the willingness of banks to actually provide such a bid bond depends largely on the attractiveness of a project as such and on the established bank-client relations. And so we came to the conclusion that probably providing bid bonds, if you have a competitive project and if you have quite a good standing with your bank, will be possible. The fourth one is the risk of not being successful in the auction and the uncertainty over the strike price. The question there is, will that actually affect actors to such an extent that they will refrain from the auction? And then we see that we assume that particularly for small actors, because by definition they have a smaller portfolio, they will have more problems to actually mitigate or spread risk. And therefore we assume that this risk of not being successful and the problem of actually developing a project while knowing that you might not be successful is the most important challenge for a particularly small actor. And last but not least, the question if small actors are more vulnerable to periods of intense competition. So what happens if during a certain time for different effects, because volumes are small or because some actors want to acquire market shares, the competition is really fierce. And then we also see then again, because they are small, they might have more problems to stand these periods of intense competition and therefore be crowded out faster. But here, as a summary on the challenges in the German case, what we saw is that with this particular design, one of the main risks that still persist is that actors may not be able to handle the risk of not being successful and therefore refrain from project development. So now let's go to the question, what can be done about it? And this is the point where I will hand over to my colleague Fabian again, who will give you a short introduction in the different options for preferential treatment.
Thank you very much, Silvana. Before I elaborate on the options for preferential treatment, it's important to keep in mind that they should not always be chosen per se, right? I mean, there's also a certain risk attached to it that preferential treatment of some actors will have adverse effects on the overall working of the auction and would have the effect that some other actors who participate in the auctions could be crowded out. So I think it's really important to now I will present you some options, but also keep in mind that these options will also have an effect on other actors in the auction or on the goals of the auction. So coming to the first set of measures, supporting measures outside of the auction. So that would be it that we don't change anything in the auction procedure, but outside the auction actors get support. For example, if there would be partial compensation of the development costs in case of lost bids, these actors would have a less of a risk of sunk costs in case they're not being awarded a project. Another option would be a consultation on quality and quantity control of the bids before the submission, because assuming that small actors are less experienced, they might not have the resources to prepare a very well-defined bid. There could be potential pitfalls involved in it, that they will have received kind of like a state-sponsored quality check for the bids to ensure that they're not being disqualified because of formalities. That would be I think both options would be rather easy to implement. The difficulty is here that particularly the second option, the consultation quality control, well, it will also not help them that much. So if you're looking for more effective preferential treatments, more effective special measures, we of course would then move to a preferential treatment within the auction. There we also looked at several options on how to support small actors within an auction. For example, they could have different pre-qualification criteria. They could be asked to do less pre-development, but of course with that also the effectiveness of the auction would be lowered because there's a higher risk of mobilization of these actors. Then there could be a quota bonus for these actors, and there could also be a different pricing rule. For example, uniform pricing for small actors instead of pay-as-bid pricing. Why is that? Because in the case of pay-as-bid pricing, actors would have to assess the competition level as well to hand in their bids. So they would have to basically assess the markup they add to the bid. In uniform pricing, they would have to do that because they will usually receive the bid, the award of the last bidder that has been awarded the project. So in that case, they would not have to assess any markups. And I think particularly for small actors who are not that experienced in assessing the competition level, it could be easier for them to have a unit pricing role. The final option then is to exempt small actors from a normal auction altogether and simply continue to pay them an emergency support tariff, for example, feed-in tariff, or to alternatively to have a non-competitive segment. That would be a case when they would not have to bid themselves in the auction, but they would get access to the strike price of the other market participants, so of the other participants that were bidding in the auction of the last rounds. And by that, they would, of course, it would be a disadvantage if they would have costs that are much higher than the ones of other actors, because in that case, this strike price might not be sufficient. However, if it's just about the risk of bidding, so just about the risk of not being awarded, then that could help as well. It's important to notice that an exception from the normal auction has the risk that, of course, it reduces the number of participants who actually participate in the auction. And particularly if you do not know how many participants could receive this preferential treatment, if you do not know, for example, how many participants would be under a certain size, then it is difficult to assess the volume that's being tendered in the auction, and therefore there is a risk of distorting competition because indeed there's not enough bidders in the auction. So it's always important to keep in mind preferential treatments carry the risk of also disturbing the rest of the auction, so the normal participants in the auction. Coming to the next issue, okay, let's say we agree that there should be a preferential treatment for small actors or for certain actors. How can they be defined? And that's really important because, as just mentioned, we want to avoid that a lot of actors who would actually not qualify for this still try to trick their way into the preferential treatment, and therefore also start the competition in the normal auction. There can be three types of definitions for actor eligibility. It's project-based definitions, for example, the de minimis function that is taking into account the size of a project. That is an option that is particularly explicitly mentioned by the EU state aid guidelines, for example, in the case of wind of 6 megawatt or 6 projects. The disadvantage of it that it's actually quite easy to administer because of that, because usually competition allows for such exemptions. The disadvantage is that it creates an incentive to realize smaller projects than possible, and therefore it appears also with the effectiveness of an auction. It makes the volume control more difficult. It could reduce the number of available sites, and it gives particularly also large actors an incentive to simply realize smaller projects and thereby take out a potentially significant amount of potential bidders from the actual auction. The second option would be the actor-based definition. For example, in the case that energy cooperatives or small and medium-sized companies would get this preferential treatment. And the advantage of it is that it could really target particular types of actors. For example, actors with small portfolios, small project developers. You can also apply the EU definition of small and medium-sized companies here, or you could address particularly energy cooperatives. So you could, for example, look at the voting rights within a project firm and to see whether they could be applicable to particular support. The risk behind that is this could be a rather blurry definition that leaves a lot of room for interpretation, and thereby also excludes other actors that could potentially or should potentially profit from preferential treatment. For example, let's take the case of energy cooperatives. If you only allow energy cooperatives to profit from these preferential treatments, you might actually take out small project developers with small portfolios that are very much, or could also be very much at risk of losing out in the auction, but that do not have the classical voting rights of energy cooperatives. On the other hand, if you focus on only small and medium-sized enterprises, then you could take out some energy cooperatives that are not just pre-developing, but also in the end owning and operating the project, and thereby by definition already have a larger balance than small project developers. So you see, it's quite difficult, this actor-based definition, although it would also be able to target this particular group. The last definition is the definition of a frequency of participation. That one would be directly related to the project portfolio side. So, for example, you say, well, the actor could only participate once a year with a project, or could only preferential treatment once a year. The advantage is that this one is then very much linking it, this preferential treatment, to the portfolio size, and that's very relevant for the risk management. I think all of the three definitions alone might not be suitable, or it depends very much on the local or on the country case, and of course can also think of combining some of these definitions, because what we have to be certain of that if you introduce such preferential treatment, that affects only a certain amount of actors, and it is not very vulnerable to misuse. Coming to the next issue, and that is that there could also be another way around, and that small actors might still be able to sufficiently participate in project development. And that's also that, of course, the market is not stagnant, but it's also evolving. So, except preferential treatment, you could also assume that new business models and new models of cooperation may be developed, and that could provide alternatives for preferential treatments. An example, for example, could be that large and small project developers cooperate together, because large actors can better spread the risk over the portfolio, and small actors have better access to sites and are locally better accepted. And that's already occurring now often, for example, in the case of wind in Germany. Then we can have an option that component producers offer the creditworthiness for bid bonds to smaller actors as a kind of a new service. The advantage here would be, for example, that taking a large wind rotor producer that has an interest in continue to sell to small producers, well, he could set up a business model where he will, together with them, develop a project and offer the creditworthiness for these small actors. And last but not least, project developers could sell pre-developed projects earlier. So what we see currently, that what Silvana showed you also in the graph for wind onshore development in Germany, is that projects often being pre-developed, then built, and then afterwards being sold to larger investors, institutional investors, municipalities, etc. We could also see a situation where project developers simply develop a project until the permit, for example, and then sell the pre-developed projects earlier to larger actors or to more solvent actors that would then participate in the auction. So you see there are still many other ways to ensure that small actors are still have an important play to role in the project development of renewable energy, even in the case of an auction scheme. However, these three, there will of course always be a risk that these actors could not in the end then bid themselves on auction. And I think this is a discussion that's being continued still, and that also we have to see how auctions, what auctions, for example, what the effect will be in Germany in the case of wind, how much small actors can adapt, or how much actually preferential treatment is really necessary. So summarizing, we've presented so far with kind of analytical framework and how to, in the policy making process, and how to get from initial goals and design options to assessing the impact that the design will have on small actors, addressing preferential treatment options, and also assessing the short and long-term consequences for small actors. As mentioned, they always have to, this effect also has to be monitored, and potentially the mechanism has to be adapted accordingly. The conclusion, in general, good auction design has to take into account actor diversity, both for political reasons and for the effectiveness and efficiency of a functioning auction scheme. For some actors, preferential treatment may be justified. That could be, for example, the bidding risk, the uncertainty on level of competition, the risk of being crowded, etc. That could really deter some small actors. However, we have to keep in mind that preferential treatments, the more effective they are, the more attractive they also have a larger impact on the general auction, and then therefore could reduce the level of competition in the general auction. So it's a very complicated and difficult weighing of the different pros and cons against each other, and there's really not one size fits all solution, but it has to be really very much targeted to the policy goals and to the evolving market structure. That's it so far. Yeah, what we can do next after the awards, of course, please ask us any questions you have. It can be both in Germany, but also in general European developments. We continue to post webinars, and there will be a next webinar in 2 weeks on a debate on auctions. We have produced several studies already on auctions, and there will be also several workshops that you can attend. And if you have any more questions or ideas and so on, also do not hesitate to contact me or my colleague Silvana Tiedemann, and we would really be happy to help you or to discuss this further with you. So thank you very much. And now to address questions, yeah, send them to us to the chat or the Q&A session, and we will answer them. Thank you.
So Fabian, maybe I can start one question, and then while people are writing in the Q&A. Do you have any examples of auctions where some form of either preferential treatment or some form of design actually was included to make sure that small or particular actors participate or can still participate?
Mm-hmm. All right. I mean, for example, you can see the case in Germany, the ground mounted PV auction. In general, there has been an attempt that the design should be as transparent and simple as possible, and therefore already give access to smaller actors. And there has been a decision that actors would rather far develop the projects for example, have and ensure very far development of the project, for example, receive already several permits. That would usually be the case for energy cooperatives, but they would then, if they could prove where we have the project very far already, they would have to hand in a lower bid bond, because it was assumed that in the case of far pre-development with many permits, there would already be a high chance of realization of the project, and therefore a low bid bond would be needed. In other European countries, we can see the case that, for example, I mean, there are different, in France, in the case of PV auctions, there have been different rounds with very specific sizes or very specific types of PV panels that was also taken into account where the project is being built or how there were ensuring system integration and so on. So then we can see that this issue was actually being addressed by simply separating these particular actors that should be supported from the rest of the auction. We can see it in the case of Denmark, where small actors in general would sometimes get for the case of onshore wind, if they had a high participation of local citizens in the project, they would get a compensation of part of their feasibility study costs if they were not being awarded. That could also be an example. Yes, but otherwise, I think it's an interesting case because we see that it's in a way also a rather German discussion, the discussion of active diversity, and in Europe, there are not so many cases where small actors are being supported. What we can see, of course, that in developing countries, the discussion is not so much on small actors, but on local actors. So how can high local content of the components be ensured? And there we can see that there are also either being a fixed quota of local components that need to be included, or that there is a bonus of preferential access to credit in that case.
So I will just read out the questions which now start to come in. The one is, in addressing the trade-off with efficiency, what are your conclusions about what preferential treatment options have a comparatively low distortive impact on the auction process? So to put this question in different words, we said that we see particular design options in order for preferential treatment, and this is basically with which we really would like to address the challenges for particular actors. And on the other hand, we have the goal of efficiency. Now, what does efficiency mean in the auction? It basically means that we have quite a high level of competition in the auction. So in order to have this high level of competition, we would like to make sure that as many actors as possible stay within the auction. Now, what my colleague Fabian showed us are these three different types of solutions, and they're particularly those which take out actors from the whole auction, reduce the amount of participants and the amount of projects which are actually part of the auction. Therefore, it reduces the level of competition, and therefore it has one of the largest impacts with efficiency. In terms of the preferential treatment which is outside of the auction, this is exactly on the other hand. So these are the options where we can say, okay, this actually increases the number of participants within the auction, and therefore it basically has, well, let's say these are no regret options. So this is really like all the options which increase the number of participants. They also they are no regret options and have very little impact or negative impact on the auction as such. Within the middle, so everything which is in terms of bonuses, quotas, some different pricing rules and so on, there is always a question which is a little bit in the details. But in general, if you set a quota, that can then also reduce efficiency because you have because you basically have to know what your quota actually should be, And what we notice is that even though there is some information available, we do not always know what exactly the actor composition is and what actor composition we would like to safeguard. So in a conclusion to the question, which options of preferential treatment have the highest effect on efficiency, those which take out actors, which exclude particular actors from the auction have the highest effect. Those which enable actors to participate have the smallest or only a positive effect, and those in the middle, which are preferential treatment within the auction, we somehow have to decide on a case-by-case basis. I hope this answers your question.
And there's another question to further explain how the access to the strike price as an option would function.
Mm-hmm.
Also to that?
Yeah, so let me just maybe also explain a little bit more into detail. So what we know is that we have a pricing rule within the auction. The pricing rule, the main known ones are uniform pricing and pay as bid. Pay as bid, everybody gets what you actually bid, and in uniform pricing, you get the strike price. So when you bid at, let's make an example, 5 cents per kilowatt hour, and the strike price is 6 cents, you will then also have, you will be eligible to having a 6 cent per kilowatt hour feed-in premium, a feed-in tariff. What the challenges are there, that for a small actor, as my colleague Fabian told us, they have to know what the competition in the market is and how it actually, what my other actors will do, so that I can calculate how much more I can actually bid in order to both make a profit and be able to compete in the auction. This is the case in pay as bid. Now, when it comes to the option of preferential treatment within or through a differentiated pricing rule, it means that normally all of the actors will have to bid with pay as bid, have to go with pay as bid, but a small amount is exempt from this rule, and they can just bid at their true cost, and they will get the strike price. As a consequence, they do not have to know that much about the level of competition anymore, because they will actually get the strike price. But at the same time, it still guarantees that they do not get any price with which they have to then realize that maybe uneconomical project, because they declare themselves through their bid what is the minimum price which they need to get in order to realize this project. So basically, this differential treatment tries to combine the advantages of pay as bid and uniform price for specific actors, all by not buying into the negative effect of uniform pricing for the overall auction.
Further questions? There's one question on the risk of crowding out smaller actors. What do you mean with market concentration? Yeah, so I mean, as mentioned, like in general, there's a risk that if a certain share of actors, of bidders secures our several rounds, always very high market shares, then there's a risk that other actors could be crowded out in the midterm. So, for example, usually if you are not being awarded in a project, but your permit is valid another 2 or 3 years, of course you will try to bid again and again as long as it's still economically feasible for you to realize the project. Then, if large actors now have seize the opportunity to secure very high shares of the market, either because they want to realize the project themselves and think, okay, they might actually bid below the production cost for a certain while to drive out other actors, or they try to secure very large shares of the one that's being auctioned without intention to actually realize it, and then are being willing after 2 or 3 years to pay the penalty accordingly, there is a risk that could occur. So that's why it also has to be watched how large the concentration is in an auction. That's often very difficult to track because, of course, projects are special purpose vehicles are being set up, and it's often difficult to track actually who the owners of the project are. But if the auction authority sets the right standards on how to register a project and so on, this usually can be monitored. Let me also give you an example. For example, in the case of China, that was the case that in the beginning of 2009 and so on, that state-owned enterprises, with the aim of securing very large shares of projects that were being auctioned and trying to crowd out smaller private investors, they actually bid very, very low prices and cross-finance that through other activities in their portfolio. So I think this is something to keep in mind too, that a strong market concentration over several rounds or years could in the end reduce the number of, reduce the competition in the auction scheme, and thereby also risk that on the mid and long term prices might increase actually. Any other questions? Otherwise,
okay, we just get no further questions here. So I guess otherwise you have our contact details here.
Yeah, stay tuned, call us if you have any questions, and also would be happy to see many of you again in 2 weeks when we have a hopefully very controversial discussion on auctions and on design. And I'm sure actor diversity will also play a rather large role there.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.